Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tracerco podcast. I'm joined as ever by my co-host Bill Rivers in Texas. How you doing, Bill?
I am doing great, Rob. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, all good. And I think you've added some letters to the end of your name since we last spoke. So congratulations on being a better qualified man than me with the
Thank you
MBA.
very much.
All right, so we're going to talk about pre-turnaround scans this week. So I guess as a bit of context and background, units and columns have certain life cycles, and every few years they need inspections and checkups. And we like our analogies on this podcast, so it's kind of like having your car serviced, isn't it? It's the first thing they always ask you when you book in is what are the problems at the moment and what's been going on with it. So the more information you have going into these turnarounds, then the better you can plan and the better the project can be delivered. Um, so I guess where we're coming in is we're getting involved looking at column operation, column efficiencies. But the thing to think about is these turnarounds, massive projects, they're planned years in advance. They can be looking at all sorts of inspection and maintenance and bottlenecking projects and catalyst regeneration and all these sorts of things. So they're
Yeah,
they're really expensive, aren't they?
absolutely. And the other thing that you can also look at is also the elimination of towers too, right? So when you do a turnaround, we want to come in and if a tower is functioning good, the trays are in position, it has a certain amount of proficiency that it's operating at. Maybe you don't want to go into that tower, even though it's on a list, because you and I both know that every year or when the turnaround comes up, I would say they have a list of towers they want to go look at. They want to just go see what's happening. And if they come across a tower that's functioning normal or is doing great, they don't go into it.
Hmm.
So, that's just another avenue or area that we can step in and add value to.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the sort of main three areas we see in Europe are the one you mentioned there, which is identifying columns that are working well. You don't need to go into. One of the main things that we see is looking at the mechanical condition of the internals. So, are the
Yep.
trays intact? Is there damage? Is there debris around? So that kind of prioritizes that tower if we see that sort of thing. But there's also things like how is the column operating in general, and is it something to do with the process parameters? So it might be that the internals are all intact, but there's some sort of flooding or buildup or something somewhere. So the operator can actually adjust the parameters and bring the process back in line without having to go in to the tower. So yeah, I think those are the main sorts of things we'd look for in a pre-turnaround scan, really, aren't they?
Yeah, if you go back to our analogies we always love to use on this show, it's like going in for like a checkup as you and I have to go in, right? The older you get, they recommend more checkups. You sit there and they go through the whole diagnostic set of suite of tools, blood work, blood
Hmm.
pressure, take your history, make sure you're doing all right. And it's essentially the same thing, right? We come in, we actually kind of talk to the operators, how's the history of the tower? What's been going on? What do you see is happening? And then from there we can gauge a better idea of how to, what type of data that we should be seeing in order to matching what the operator is saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, all right. So we'll just dive into a couple of examples. We've got a case study on the website about pre-turnaround scans. So maybe we'll just run through a couple of quick examples. So the first one was a client that they'd planned a major turnaround. They'd had this initial planning phase, and they were finding that the project list was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they had problems really with the schedule, getting all these projects into the time they had planned. So like we said before, what they wanted to do was look at which ones really needed doing, which towers really needed scanning. Are there projects that they can drop off the list? So one of the projects was entering a column on the amine unit, but there was no issues with the column. It was up for inspection, but it could actually be delayed until the next turnaround. So what we saw in this first case study was kind of a textbook example of a column operating well. So you've got um, the areas of low transmission to high transmission, going back to vapor, showing all the process fluid, showing all the internals are there. So really, it was kind of an easy one for us to come in and say this tower is operating really well. There's no issues. You don't need to have this on the project list. You can drop it off and you can move on to more high priority projects.
that is a classic example of what we do right
Hmm.
there. We do this all the time. Sometimes we get a list of like 20 towers, and out of the 20 towers, when they at the end of the day, the operators might whittle it down to two they really need to go into.
Yeah,
And you got to
yeah.
think about also how much money we're saving them. Like
Mm.
you mentioned before, millions and millions of dollars go into these turnarounds. And if we
Yeah.
can save them a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 there, it adds up.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the second example is kind of another thing to do with cost, because sometimes these turnarounds, if there's damage identified, then our clients have to order parts. They have to get emergency deliveries. So
Yep.
if they can see the damage earlier and order these parts more in advance, then it brings the cost down. It means they're back online quicker. So the second example again would be kind of a textbook example of internal damage where we've got areas of abnormal and varying transmission. Shows that trays have collapsed. It shows that there's debris all over the tower. So again, this is really where we're coming in and we're saying there's a problem with this tower. This is where the tray damage is. These are the things these are the parts you should be ordering, and you need to have them lined up ready to go within the turnaround. So it's kind of like a pit stop in Formula One, isn't it? Where
Yep.
you stop the car, you get the tires off, you get them back on, and you get up and running again. So same thing with the parts. You get the tower, you get the trays replaced, and you get the process back online as quick as
Yeah.
possible.
And keep in mind, when you order these parts, it's not like you get them in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It takes months to get these parts. So that's why it's really critical that when we show up and we identify damage in a certain area, that these guys can jump on it right away, that they can start ordering all the different trays, they can start ordering everything, because if they have to order it in a pinch or in an emergency, it's going to cost them 3-4 times what it normally would. This way, they can get them on order months in advance. They have all their stuff stacked up, ready to go when they go inside and start swapping out parts.
Yeah, yeah. And then I guess the final example I just wanted to mention was a client that actually used baseline scanning as well. So as well as the pre-turnaround scans, after the process was restarted, they performed some baseline scans, and that really gives them a wealth of data to overlay these scans and keep a good monitor on the column performance. So this has been particularly useful to kind of hit problems early on. So if you're seeing increased froth levels or potential flooding, you can overlay the baseline scan with the pre-turnaround scan, and you can really kind of monitor performance and bring problems back in line by altering parameters rather than having to intervene and go into the column. So yeah, that's just a good example of baseline scanning and where that's useful too as well.
We always recommend baselines on this side of the world. We always recommend it because it's like you said, it's a great starting position, right? You're always you got everything operating efficiently, got everything working correctly. This is the way you want the tower to run. This is your baseline. You know exactly what's going on. So if something were to happen down the road, you have something to go back to and compare to.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classic. I mean, it's what we do, bread and butter all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I think that's the three things I wanted to talk about and just show that these scans can save money, save time by knowing what parts you need before. We can reduce the overall turnaround time by not entering columns that you don't have to. And it can show which columns can be brought back into line without entering by adjusting the parameters. So yeah, that's great. Anything else to add, Bill?
No, I mean, I think we covered it pretty good. I mean, it's one of the things that Tracerco does on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. This is something we help our customers with all the time. They see great value in it. And that's something that we stress, that we come in, we're going to help you solve your problems, we're going to help find out what's going on, and we're going to be there right with you through the whole process, just so we get you where you need to be, so you can be back up and running quickly and more efficiently.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. Well, that's great. Yeah. So we'll be back soon with another episode. But until then, it's bye from me and take care, everyone.
Great. Hey, and just let everybody know out there, if you need to get a hold of Rob and I for any reason, we can be found on LinkedIn. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening and have a great day.